Hello, everyone. My name is Yawa Idi, and I'm the program coordinator of Africa Center's Enhancing Gender Equity Program, and you are listening to Better Than the Cure Preventing Intimate Partner Violence. This is a podcast series that will feature many guests from different fields, sectors, areas, all with knowledge and expertise on intimate partner violence, specifically its prevention here within Alberta in African, Black, and Caribbean communities. Today, we have Zainab Giwa, who is a certified Canadian psychotherapist with more than 8 years of experience in the human services. She has a master's in psychology with an undergrad in social work, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about herself, the work that she does specifically in terms of counseling therapy, and a special project called Project Exodus as well.
Thank you, Yawa. So I'm so glad to be here today. That's awesome that I get to come in here and speak and connect. So yes, just a little bit about myself. I am a registered psychotherapist. Yawa's kind of giving you this field about what my educational background is. I won't go into that. But typically my day looks like just working with individuals, families, and couples with regards to whatever psychotherapeutic needs that they may need. When it comes to any kind of past trauma work and any developmental issues that are going on in people's lives. And so I kind of work within a few modalities to help deal with that. One of the main modalities I work in is cognitive behavioral therapy. And then there's the cognitive behavioral therapy with a trauma focus, narrative behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, and solution focused therapy. So those are the modalities that I utilize when I'm working, and those really help me to ensure that my clients get a full wraparound support as well as being connected with whatever informal supports they have within their lives to solve some of the issues that they're going through. So that's a little bit about what I do on the daily. It's very busy and super intense, but really fun as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
And as busy as we thank you for taking the time to
of course.
talk to us today. So we'll kind of jump right into it. As a mental health service provider, your role is very pivotal in the work or in the realm of intimate partner violence. So do you mind just kind of starting us off with a little bit of your experience in working with either perpetrators or victims in the realm of intimate partner violence?
Yeah, so intimate partner violence is one of the biggest issues I find that happen within the family system that can really disrupt the dynamic of the family.
100%.
And from a few different angles. I think, we are always focused on, the victimology aspect of intimate partner violence, but the perpetrators also are victims of something that caused them to do obviously the perpetration to happen. And then if there are children involved
Right.
or close family and friends or parents, things like that.
Even community members as well.
Exactly. It's also very impactful for them too. So we also consider things from that lens of people not actively involved in the relationship itself. However, from the victim, I don't really like the word victim, but I'll say from the survivor side of intimate partner violence, even though we do have some of the reciprocal abuse, what happens is that we typically will see, lots of disruption to the emotional regulation of the individual, lots of self-doubt, low self-esteem, really just, a constriction of the person's integrity of their personality and what they're really meant to be. And so there's a loss of sense of self, of course, any kind of physical, sexual violence, financial, any kind of emotional abuse, verbal abuse. All those things have a significant impact on a person's mental health and really shifts the way that they function. So we look at things like psychopathologies like anxiety, depression, PTSD as some of the common factors that could come up. Now, on the perpetrator side of things, it's really a little bit more interesting, especially because typically it's not very front facing when it comes to looking at why they are the way they are, or how they become
100%.
abusers in that sense. So typically what I've seen is any kind of substance abuse, that definitely has a huge role to play, and then we're looking at childhood trauma, child adverse, experiences, and then maybe we're even looking at something like some gang involvement or like any kind of environmental factors. Sometimes the intimate partner that is the perpetrator could even be someone who's unwell,
Right.
in the sense that they have some kind of mental or cognitive disability, or even a physical disability. Maybe they were able-bodied in the past and then now,
Mm-hmm.
kind of have lost some abilities, and that's frustrating, and that can cause people like that to be
Mm-hmm.
abusive as well in that
Mm-hmm.
sense too. So yeah, it looks a bit different on that side, but what we're really seeing there is a need for anger management, emotional regulation, and also any sorting out of any addiction
Right.
or an addictive past or any childhood trauma that could be taking place. Yeah.
100%. Thank you for that. And I love all those things that you mentioned because they're tangible and they're practical, and we
Hmm.
can implement them specifically for this project, which is the Enhancing Gender Equity Project. Our
Yeah.
focus is African, Black, and Caribbean populations.
Yes,
So the things that you
absolutely.
mentioned, anger management, classes
Yeah.
for emotional regulation, this
Yes,
community, our community specifically, that's not something where you can put up a poster and people run and go and take it up, right? So
absolutely.
what is a way that we can engage or pull people from our community to kind of, and this goes a long way in terms of prevention, people who can control the anger, people who have coping mechanisms for their emotions, and release them in a positive way. So, the
Hmm.
outlets aren't, abuse or harming others. It,
Hmm.
it's, it goes a long way in the well-being of our community, but we know people don't, or our community specifically doesn't subscribe
Yeah.
to things like that,
Hmm.
right away. So how can we implement those things or have people uptake those services
Hmm.
in our community, or make them culturally relevant or sensitive if
Yes, absolutely. Because I think that a lot of the statistics, although maybe generalized, may not necessarily have a specific, there won't be too many that have a specific view of what it looks like in the Afro-Caribbean
Mhm.
populations. I find that within those populations, one of the best ways to kind of, engage is really just to begin to have the conversation.
Mhm.
I know that it may seem counterintuitive to begin to kind of say, okay, you know what, how do we facilitate this, and like, begin to, create groups, but it's like, how do we engage people to even attend those groups as
Exactly.
well? So social media is a wonderful way to do
Mhm.
that. I find that a lot of people are super involved in that now, and just having access to the information of like, where
Mhm.
do I get the information about some of these issues that I'm experiencing? Normalizing therapy
Mhm.
and the discussions around mental health. I find that that's really a big challenge for our population.
100%.
It seems as though there's still quite a bit of stigma, although it's been a little bit diffused now.
Mhm.
But I think that is as a result of lots of these types of conversation and the programs that happen at
Mhm.
places like the African Center, just to kind of bring out a lot of these hidden things that
Mhm.
because a lot of the African and Caribbean populations come from backgrounds that have been challenging,
Right.
right? And so, in those types of backgrounds, you can, where trauma is visible and it's, things have been a little bit more difficult for those populations by virtue of the oppressive, patriarchal
Mhm.
structures of
Yeah.
society, racism, microaggression, some
Yeah.
of those things can be very difficult to deal with.
Mhm.
And so, what happens is people become codependent within their families, within their communities. And when you have codependent relationships or trauma backgrounds, you have a legacy of secrets.
Mm.
And so, you can see throughout the history of some of these families and are in inability to really record some of the things, like you go to a Italian family, for example, or Italian center, and you can see, oh, this great grand
Right.
person was here and this is what they did and this
Yeah.
is how they impacted the community, but I don't always see that the mirroring of that
Mhm.
in our African and Caribbean communities.
Mhm.
And I think that that loss of history, that loss of sense of self, and the codependency, along with that legacy of secrets, and that the silencing of vulnerable voices
Right.
in our communities is really what is impacting it. So I think it's really just about starting the conversation,
Mhm.
having conversations with people, and really noticing, okay, here are some of the symptoms of what intimate partner violence could look like. Not
Mhm.
that we can never be 100% sure without it a complete evaluation,
Mhm.
but just to kind of understand that, yeah, by seeing some of those things and knowing the language
Mhm.
around what to ask, like, hi, I noticed, you kind of have this, black eye. I didn't see that last week. Are you doing okay? Was that an accident? And so you kind of give them space to be able to share, especially if they feel comfortable, and as we begin to build trust
Right.
within our communities. I think we have to understand that we're meant to be here for each other, and that inclusivity even within our own community is very important to note as well. Yeah.
100%. And I think when we talk about intimate partner violence, for the most part, people think of, that black eye, which is definitely a huge part of it. But
Yeah.
there's also a lot of other things that go into intimate partner
Absolutely.
violence and what consists of
Yes.
abuse. So do you mind kind of speaking more on the emotional or psychological things that people don't actually think about when they think of intimate partner violence, and how those can escalate from, very, very minor things that you won't think of as first as being abusive, but they can actually escalate, and then you see those implications on mental health. So
Yes, 100%. Yeah, you are right. It is not always physical. Actually, more often than not, it's financial, before it is even verbal or emotional. Yeah, I think that, there are certain disparities, when it comes to looking at intimate partner violence that, don't necessarily allow us kind of to see the truth, because we're always expecting to have it be visible.
very like
Yeah.
physical, like you can see it on the person's
Yeah,
face,
the
which again
bruises and
is a big part
that's
of it
relevant.
too.
Absolutely.
But we kind of want to bring awareness, especially like within African Black communities. The financial piece is a huge piece. So I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah, absolutely. So really, when we're looking at some of like the verbal or emotional aspects of things, what you can be looking for, is someone who may language, is a wonderful thing, because the way people speak about themselves will really tell you a lot. And I think, if we're going to be conscientious about this cause, it's important for us to really listen to people when they speak, especially if we notice changes in behavior. I think behavior is one of the best ways to really inform.
Telltale signs, right?
Exactly. So the context of cognitive behavioral therapy really just says, okay, as you think, you feel, and you behave in that certain way. So if you notice a behavioral change, something is wrong in the thinking, right?
Right.
Exactly. So one of the biggest signs I would say is a behavioral change. You want to really assess that. So for example, you have a friend, super bubbly all the time, but you notice that once a week she's just really low, or he's just really low, emotionally, and like, or you notice that there is a friend who you used to see quite often, but all of a sudden they are just unavailable.
Right.
And you haven't heard from them in a while, like they're not out anywhere with any other friends, no posting on social media, they've just gone dark. It's time to kind of check in and say, okay, and they're possibly in a relationship, maybe in a common law situation, or they're married, or they're living together or not, right? You really just want to say, oh, hey, I've noticed that, over the past couple of weeks, or every Friday, it seems like, you're like this, or there's a consistent pattern to the way these things go, because the cycle of abuse follows a consistent pattern as well. So it's very up and down. And sometimes they may highlight some, inconsistencies with their relationship, or you find that some of the things they share could be incongruent,
Right.
with what you've noticed.
Right.
Then it's time to kind of start asking some questions, not to be intimidating or like obviously accusatory, but really just like checking in to see if the person is okay,
Right, and providing that safe space.
Exactly.
100%. So in terms of you mentioned like therapy and normalizing that, what are the benefits of especially as you mentioned, people from African Black or Caribbean communities, if they immigrate here, they're coming from very challenging backgrounds. And a lot of times, we don't have mental health is not a concept that is as a staple back home as it is here. And even here, we still have a long way to go.
Absolutely.
But, no one is talking about therapy or anxiety or trauma, despite coming from severely traumatic experiences. And that can manifest in, IPV or other issues that we see here.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how can we kind of bring that to the forefront? And also, what are the benefits of maybe having therapy as a preventative measure? Because it's not when you go crazy that you need therapy. It's also a way to be proactive about your mental health or about potential issues. So what are some benefits of therapy to people that might need that help for emotional regulation or anxiety or anger management, getting that help before a situation bubbles up or erupts?
Yeah, I think the benefits are numerous. A lot of people view therapy as like, there has to be a crisis first before we show up. And I see that especially in couples, and I say, wow, if you, thought about premarital counseling, we may not be here
Right.
today
Yeah.
dealing with some of the foundational issues that, were not touched at all, and some, really terrible expectations that have gone awry. I think, when it comes to access, that's a big deal when we want to talk about, dealing with the visibility of therapists who are African, Caribbean, or BIPOC therapists that look like them, have shared experiences, and have knowledge of where they're coming from. And that access is very important, and to know, oh, this is where I could find someone who could understand the unique experiences of my community. So we're really looking for cultural competency first before we even get into the benefits. But as pertaining to the benefits specifically, you have a lot of wonderful theoretical approaches that'll help to kind of deal with that. One of them that I really like for couples is the Gottman theory, really looking at the love mapping and really understanding where each individual's needs are, taking into account attachment styles. The pair assessment is another thing they're looking at. You're looking at the personal assessment of intimate, kind of like relations, and like what that looks like, your partner's preferred avenue of intimacy. So we're looking at like whether you like it's more physical intimacy or more experiential when it comes to like, or relational. And so we're looking at those few factors and just, kind of enhancing the compatibility of the couple and getting them more aligned. It's also an opportunity to kind of take a look at, okay, what are some of the trauma backgrounds that you both have, and in this dispensation of therapy, kind of open things up a little bit. Therapy is usually compared to like, this wound up yarn ball, and you have to detangle
Unravel it all. Yeah.
exactly. And so that's a huge benefit. So when we come together, typically my way of dealing with couples, especially when intimate partner violence is involved, is to kind of have couple sessions together just to kind of understand the dynamic of the couple and watch them in their space of comfort, and then now move into more of a independent sessions with each of the couples and act as like sort of like a diplomat, or like a go-between two, what I would like to call nations, is how I describe it to my and negotiating terms, right, of like, okay, what's comfortable for you, and then you really get to the truth of what each person's experience is in that relationship. But I think that, removing the stigma from what therapy is meant to be, because conventional therapy over the years, I mean, intimate partner violence, I mean, really just got its notoriety in the 70s. This is a very new thing. Like, there was no recognition for this, no policy, no legislation, no supports. And then you had people who kind of championed and kind of brought this situation to the fore, for government officials to begin to take note
And say, hey, this is getting serious.
this is an issue. Yeah, when you have a certain amount of deaths and like, arrests and things like that, and just community disruption as a result of that. And so because it's so new, I think that a lot of times people, may not necessarily feel as though therapy may be one of the most active ways to deal with it. They'd rather look to, okay, we have to go to a shelter, we have to do this. But once the initial fire's put out, then, nature abhors a vacuum. So once everything's cleared out, what's coming back in? The likelihood for recidivism rate for someone who's a perpetrator of violence, that's still high if they haven't had any type of mental health intervention. And then for the person who is a survivor of abuse, the likelihood for them to re-enter a relationship that's like that, haven't not dealt with some of those issues that caused them to be in that type of relationship in the beginning, is
that
going
to be passed on to children.
exactly. And this absolutely, that's it. So the main benefit is that you stop in its tracks. The first time it happens, it's done. This is not now a generational issue. And the likelihood for that person's quality of life to be improved is, exponential, right? And even when you look at the perpetration of violence and the people who kind of like have difficulty, regulating their emotions, and become perpetrators of violence, they don't have to be, because there's legal ramifications for this, right? And once, the law is involved, then, the recovery from that is extensive. And so to keep going in and out of jail or having, restraining orders, POs, all these restrictions, and it shows up, it hinders your career, like so many different things, reputation. I mean, it becomes very difficult. It's very isolating for the perpetrator as well as the survivor and their children and the families and the shame and all of these things. So we can deal with the issues that come out of it, the residual fallout, and develop, good guiding principles for healthy relationships and healthy family dynamics through therapy. And then we can also reduce the generational impact as well as the recidivism rate for perpetrators as well.
So I love that. And I love that you mentioned family dynamics, because when we started this project, we kind of took a look at the main factors or specific factors, because we know intimate partner violence doesn't just spiral out of nowhere. There's certain factors that, put it into place. And some of the 4 that we identified were gender relations, and this is, the expectations of a man or a woman, especially coming from back home, and how those conflict with what they are in Canada. And someone's not fulfilling one, or one is not living up to the expectations, and that results in something. Parenting was also another one, because the way you raise children, in your country of origin looks a little bit different when you come to Canada, and there's expectations with that. Finances, which you mentioned was a big one. Employment, education, as well. So within these factors, mental health kind of has a role to do in all of them, or therapy, or just, the well-being of someone in general. So my question to you is, in this case, does mental health just exacerbate issues that were already there, or is it vice? For example, if gender relations are going wrong, does that result in mental health issues, but then results in intimate partner violence? Or can it be vice versa, where someone has mental health issues and now you have this issue of gender relations, or parenting gone wrong, or you don't have enough money, and that results in intimate partner violence? Is it one or the chicken or the egg, essentially, or are they both combined together and create the issue?
I think they're both combined, and then there are also offshoots of that. So if we think of this issue as a tree, for example, using that analogy, the root of the problem is our let's say cultural ideals or expectations or understandings or principles, guiding laws or whatever about what healthy family dynamics look like. Not healthy family dynamics. Most of it aren't health. Most of these ideologies are not healthy and based in sound doctrine, quote unquote, but really are just based on what worked for that community at the time. And it's just been passed down and passed down. And a lot of the risks when it comes to some of these cultural ideologies or some of these traditions or understandings of what a typical family should look like is that they're not changed over time. No one goes back to revisit the policy to say, oh, should we adjust this for modern time?
Change something.
So
but it should be dynamic, actually.
Exactly. So let's take the structure of a family system in a patriarchal society. I want to say that Canada is moving towards more of an egalitarian society, but hey, we'll just say that for but so let's say we're coming from more of a patriarchal or male dominant society and coming to Canada and the adjustment for family, for example. Let's do it like this. We have mom and dad, 2 kids. Okay. Mom and dad, 2 kids, married. Okay. That's a simple form. And then we say they are an immigrant family coming from Korea, or actually, let's say the Caribbean, or even some Central Africa. And they're coming over, and they have to kind of there's a bit of a culture shock that comes with
as soon as you
how
down,
women live their lives here versus what it's like there now. In some of those countries mentioned, what could happen is that in a patriarchal society like that, or a male dominant society, you'll typically see more traditional roles in the family. As we move more towards post-industrialization and a modern society, what we're looking at is now more women in the workforce. What does that look like? And empowerment of women financially. What does that bring? The inequality in the structure of the responsibilities within the home. When we look at female education on the rise, then we kind of now see, okay, there's some disparities here that could be challenging. The patriarchy, when a woman's educated, she challenges many things. It's just a fact of, the status quo of how society typically looks. And so, we say, okay, like back there, maybe she had a degree, didn't necessarily work, had children, he worked, was the financially in control there. And, now they've decided to move over here. If there's a history of violence in that, and maybe his family or hers, there could be that, that's something that has been normalized for them and their families. And it's a belief that if you have a wife or if you have a husband that misbehaves or children that misbehave, physical violence is normal. You can utilize that as a tool to correct quote unquote bad behavior. Yes. Verbal abuse is very commonplace. The conversations, that I've had with some clients and things that have been said to them, it's no wonder that they struggle with, understand their identity, and also any type of, achievement. Nothing is enough. I mean, it's just, we can go on and on and on about that. And then obviously, you have the emotional piece of things too, where you have the manipulation, the gaslighting, and some of those things are also normal. And, you kind of see that from the head of the home to the assistant head of the home and the children as well. So coming down that way, and then they move to Canada. And let's say, obviously it's a different economy.
Right.
Now we have a 2-parent income, and she goes to work.
Right.
And she's exposed now to a community of women at work who, are working and they have these goals and everybody's working really hard. And now she's beginning to dream for herself. Like, oh, what can I do? Like, I've just been at home this whole time, raising kids. And now my kids are maybe now 11 and they're doing extracurricular activities. And they have a life outside of the home.
Yeah.
And now, I'm confronted with this man that I married. I'm not really sure if this is the person I want to be with. The way he treats me is the same way he treated me back home. I don't really know if this is what I want. And then, the questions arise, and then maybe there's a change in behavior for her. She's not as quote unquote submissive
As she was back home.
Expected
to be. Right.
Exactly. And so maybe there's some healthy rebellion taking place. Not that rebellion's great, but the idea is that she's maybe taking a little bit more ownership for her life and seeking more independence. And that's not a bad thing, right? But I think that, from the male's perspective, he could see that as like, okay, this is challenging because now I have to feel my power is now diminished because it's grown. Yeah. And so I think that makes things quite difficult in the sense that she now has to, whatever talents or growth that she could, have expanded on, she now has to subdue because of his lack of security in self. And especially because if he's been part of an abusive family, he also has some of those identity issues as well, and that lack of understanding of who he is, and has continued to perpetrate that too throughout his life. And there's been no change, right? So now it's going to be difficult for him to, and I mean, the example can go in several different ways. We could say, okay, the physical route, he sees that she's getting more independent, so he beats her so that she falls in line, sees that she's gaining more independence. And he says, maybe in the verbal abuse now comes up, you're this, you're that, name calling, insults and things like that, and humiliation in front of friends, family, children, that kind of thing. Then let's say we go the emotional route, we can see definitely there'll be some manipulation and gaslighting of her emotions, suppression and like a mandate for her to repress her feelings, and a lack of ability for her to have any opinions in the home, a complete disregard for her emotional disposition. Then you say financial, it's like, okay, all the money you make comes to me and I pay all the bills. And so you get $100 a month. Right. That's ridiculous. Right. But yeah, and then just wrap around, kind of restriction on of her authority in the home as well, is massive. And she's back where essentially she started.
Right at the
Yeah.
beginning. Yeah. No, thank you for painting that picture because,
Mhm.
again, it's not just always the physical, there's certain aspects and the gradual buildup of it too. Like, it's not just overnight, it's really those little things that build
Yeah.
up, or, certain things gone wrong within the generations, all the way down to exactly what you said, starts working, becomes more empowered, more independent. That
Mhm.
causes issues with how
Yeah.
the gender roles are conflicting, and
Exactly.
intimate partner violence has room to, rear its head. No, thank you
Absolutely.
for that. And I kind of want to shift gears a little bit here as we
Mhm.
wrap up the conversation. And at the very beginning, we talked earlier a little bit about Project Exodus, which is,
Yes.
maybe you can go a little bit into more detail about that and how that came about, and essentially how maybe Christianity, and we had some other gets where we talk about how religion as well can be used as a way to justify intimate partner violence.
Mhm.
And we kind of want to mitigate that and kind of maybe bring in faith leaders and how what their role can be in making sure that,
Right.
religious texts or beliefs aren't used to, justify or
Mhm.
perpetrate intimate partner violence, but rather actually
Yeah.
prevent it.
Absolutely. So, the Exodus Initiative Project was started at Cornerstone Christian Church of God by a wonderful pastor named Pastor Emmanuel Dewey. He's fabulous and really well connected in the community. I think that, it's something that was needed at the time, because of some of the trends that I think he saw in his ministry. Um, yeah, it's a project that's really near and dear to my heart, especially being able to be so closely involved. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about what it is. So Exodus meaning exit, essentially having that Christian connotation with the Israelites exiting Egypt, their place of oppression. So that's the symbolism behind the name. But I think that there's a few pieces that kind of create the mandate. So the first is that it's really just a focus on women who are survivors of intimate partner violence,
Right.
who are single moms or made single moms as a result of the intimate partner violence, and then their children as well, being part of the clientele or the demographic that we service. And then so we're looking at it being it's a little bit of a three-pronged approach. So there's the one aspect of creating awareness, which Pastor Emmanuel has been very vocal in the community about it, has been on the news, CBC radio, speaking about this particular issue. And then now there's the arm of the psychoeducation piece where we go and we have groups and classes and information sessions about, the religious context of what a healthy relationship should look like.
Sorry to
And
interject. So you bring in like the religion with the psychoeducation aspect. Okay, that's
absolutely, yes. So it's a very well balanced, holistic
fine.
perspective on intimate partner violence. So I think it's not just focused on religion, but also the realistic challenges of everyday life for women and their children experiencing the residual issues of or the active intimate partner violence, and then also the aspect of bringing in faith and saying, okay, you know what? God has a different plan for you. Like this is not what he designed. Jeremiah 33:3 says, God has, plans he's created for you from the very beginning. He
Right.
knew you in your mother's womb and all these wonderful things. And so we like to, share those truths with the clients that we service and incorporate faith. Faith also has a community arm to it as well. So bringing them into the fold, into the ministry and saying, hey, you have a family, you have a support here of people who are going to check on you, who are going to make sure you're well and your children are well. And the children are now in, the children's ministry where they, work with other kids. There's youth days where they teach them different skills, how to manage emotions properly, emotional regulation, dreams.
It's
What
kind
is
of
your
like a
purpose?
prevention piece, actually, because you're raising kids
Exactly.
up, as well as in the way that they should go, and they won't stray from it, which
Absolutely.
is awesome.
Yes. So there's that piece, the psychoeducation arm. And, I that resonates throughout all the teachings in the ministry. Of course, it's broader, but there's that aspect of it too that's quite frequently highlighted. And then there's the piece of the kind of one-on-one, crisis work, crisis intervention work. And so what we're really looking at is, okay, we get a notification someone is in an intimate partner violence situation or there's active violence being perpetrated. Now, how do we handle that? So typically our first thing is obviously contact the person who is going through that intimate partner violence, or deal with the family and say, okay, you know what, how do we get you out of here? This is an emergent situation. We need to remove you from this because it's unsafe for you and children at this time. So typically what will happen is that, we try to kind of make sure the basic needs are met for that family. And so we have, we either put them up somewhere safe, and that is undisclosed to whoever they are, of course, there's the security wing to our ministry as well. So we have a little bit of a nice agreement, working partnership with them for escorting and things like that, to make sure that they're going to provide a little bit more safety in that way. And so everything is very, very quiet, and obviously we're very conscientious about the sharing of information. So it's all confidential. No one knows. It's like, this isn't a conversation that happens at church or anything like that. It's very, off the books and aside. And then, so once the basic needs are met, the next step would now be to connect to community resources that help. So of course, any governmental funds that will, kind of support them rebuilding a life somewhere else, making sure that we're kind of creating longevity in their ability to kind of leave the situation. And a huge aspect of that is the financial piece as well, because we find that typically once a person has decided to leave without a strong financial backing, it makes it extremely hard. And so that's what we're able to kind of intervene with, as well as dealing with the mental health aspect of things too. So there's some PTSD that comes with that,
100%.
initial shock, especially for the children. So we're checking in, we're doing assessments, we're saying, okay, here are recommendations for mental health connections. These are some reliable sources in the community that we have vetted, and we're saying that, we'll be able to support you, and that we connect them with those individuals to kind of provide that mental health support for them by virtue of therapy. Yeah.
That's great. And it sounds like a very robust project.
It is.
Very thorough. And it's awesome that it's intervention. So as I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, okay, well, our project is prevention. Like our main goal is to prevent, these situations from even happening. So based on anything you said, what aspects do you think can be kind of pulled out of that, so it can be used maybe in a prevention framework? So the fact that you mentioned, there's the psychoeducation that happens after, the client is taken in, is that something that can be done, prior to, the situation even happening to begin with? What aspects can we kind of maybe we can tailor to make it into more of a preventative, just like brainstorming here, because I think that's really awesome when you just mentioned.
So I think that, if we're speaking of Christianity as its own doctrine, I mean, we say like, okay, obviously we, know Moses went and got the 10 commandments and thou shalt not steal and all these wonderful rules that we had to follow. But, when we get to the New Testament, you really see Christ saying the only commandment and the most forefront commandment that we need to deal with, or really put a heavy focus and emphasis on, is love. And I think that that's a huge piece that's missed, that really will fill in a lot of gaps. I think that even in couples therapy, it's so interesting that how I want to say not so often the word love shows up in those conversations. It's very like, these are the things you need to do. This is what the modality dictates. Let's focus on that. That's why I really enjoy Gottman theory being, talking about the love maps and kind of that alignment of the couple. But that, I digress. Really, what I'm really talking about is, love is the main component of this, and a family doesn't exist well, or a healthy relationship doesn't exist unless there's a healthy foundation of love and compassion. And so when we look at it from the Christian perspective, we see that the Bible likens a marriage or intimate relationship, a marriage specifically, to that analogy of like Christ and the church. And if we look at the relationship between Christ and the church, it's very sacrificing, right? So when we talk about love, what does that do? Love is the only emotion that is felt that can make you do something for someone, like make you sacrifice for someone else. And that's the big piece that's missing. Of course, the church submits to Christ as its leader, as its protector, as its provider, but there is a symbiotic relationship that, like, where there's a transference of virtues. So Jesus provides love, and the church receives that love, that sacrificial love, and also provides that also returns that with honor, and here's the authority to kind of deal, and we see this every day, even in the way politics is run, for example. When a politician is campaigning, they will say, here are all the ways I'm going to love you, and give me the authority to rule over you, because I care about your. It is a natural way to get people to agree. And you can't go, the Bible says, can two walk together unless they agree? You have to agree to marry someone. You have to agree to decide to build a family together. And love is a huge aspect of that. The man is meant to love, the woman is also meant to love, but the man is meant to love and the woman is meant to submit. And the only way she can feel comfortable submitting aspects of her life, or all different aspects of her life, or her thinking, or like to work collaboratively together, is by virtue of that love being exponential and sacrificial. So if you're a man and you're in a relationship, and you want someone who's going to be submissive or have those traditional values, you have a massive responsibility of love. You cannot expect someone to give you things without giving anything in return, and love is what you're meant to give. And that's what the Christian doctrine really speaks to, is that exchange of love. And once that love goes towards the woman, she's able to feel vulnerable and safe, and the agreeableness goes up. But once that love doesn't exist and the demands are high, don't expect so much done. Especially if you expect things done, know that you'll have to be in an oppressive states, wielding your authority as a weapon, not as a vehicle of love towards her.
Which is the opposite of what, Christianity kind of sets in place for.
Exactly. And so many people are of the erroneous ideology that it's actually opposite, which is that, you just beat them and they'll fall in line. And it doesn't make sense. Nobody's dictating that.
No, awesome. Thank you for that. And as we wrap up the conversation here, I guess one of my last questions for you is, what role can faith leaders now play in everything that you mentioned in terms of Christianity and how it views love and relationships and intimacy in the way that it should be? And we know that, pastors and, faith leaders are trusted in the community. So how can we bring them on board? What's the best way to engage them to say, hey, this is what we want you to help the people with, so that they understand, what love should be like, and what an intimate relationship should be like, to prevent, actually, because it's a preventative measure when you get faith leaders on board to talk about these things. And it's a conversation, it's hard to get people on board to start talking about things such as intimate partner violence. So how important is it to make sure like we're talking to these faith leaders and we're saying, hey, we need you a part of this? And it's kind of your duty, or an obligation almost, to the people that you serve, because they trust you, they believe you, and they listen to you.
Exactly. I would say one of the biggest things is leading by example. As a faith leader, or any type of leader, the exposure you get is massive. And so if your relationship isn't based on, the ideas of like love and like, that love and authority dynamic, then we're going to have a big problem, first of all. So the people are going to watch and they'll notice things, right? Because, when you're in the spotlight, everything is seen, essentially. So lead by example, make sure your marriages are secure, and your relationships with people are not perpetrating violence in any way. That would be the first thing. Now, having said that, obviously now it's really about the conversation. What are the opportunities when ministering to people, for you to take advantage of talking about this type of situation? And how are you designing the family structure? I mean, when we think about faith leaders and their roles to play, a lot of them conduct marriages. A lot of them say, okay, you have to do this premarital counseling. What are the conversations being had there, to kind of destroy some of the erroneous ideologies around what a healthy relationship looks like? Because there has to be an understanding that we're not doing marriage like our parents did. If we're going to do it or like previous generations did, if we're going to do it the right way, what is that? And let's get clear, and really have the messaging be sound on that for both men and women. More importantly, men, because I think that there's sometimes, not enough information for
Right.
them, or not
On
enough
healthy
leadership
relationships. Yeah.
and mentorship. And male mental health again is another passion of mine, because it's silenced and unspoken in some quarters. And it's just be strong, and be stoic, and
Right. Right.
and a woman is just meant to be docile and silent. And that doesn't work. So everybody has their needs and opinions that they expect to be met within a marriage or a marital relationship. So then what does that look like healthily? So I think that in those conversations, premarital counseling is where, when they have those conversations, it's important to definitely bring things like this up. When they're ministering, sharing the word or the gospel or things like that, it's important to also kind of highlight some of these dynamics and bring them up as like, okay, this is a concern. We are watching this. We do have our finger on the pulse when it comes to this issue, and we want to advise that this is wrong, and please be convicted of that, and like
Right.
kind of understand there are other ways to kind of deal with it. But I think that what faith leaders can do is also offer a different approach to this, and really highlight the love and compassion aspect of marriage, and showing how to work collaboratively within a marriage, and also helping align the expectations of people going into marriage, or
Yes.
that are in marriages already, to kind of say, yeah, like, this is what is going to happen. You're going to have arguments. You're going to have, disagreements. Here is the proper way of handling things. I think that people need a step-by-step, kind of understanding of conflict management. I think within marriages and intimate partner relationships that, I think a lot of people don't have access to, and faith leaders can provide that information in a way
100%.
that's accurate. Yeah.
100%. And I even think, even going a step further, and you mentioned therapy at the beginning, and one of my questions, but we got so lost in the conversation. I was like, I'll bring it in at the end, is that although you're a therapist and you're trained and you're qualified, even equipping faith leaders with some sort of training outside of the spiritual context, and the spiritual counseling is 100% important for the people that seek it, but also maybe some additional training in terms of what intimate partner violence can look like in maybe a more secular aspect, outside of the context of
Absolutely.
religious faith, which is, and hand in hand together, they could really supplement and be extremely beneficial. So for you to mention that premarital counseling, and what is to be expected when you actually enter this relationship with this person, supplemented with maybe additional trainings of, okay, this is what to expect when identifying intimate partner violence, and maybe you might not have all the capacity to deal with it or the knowledge, but this is where you can get it, and this is who you can go to.
Absolutely.
To them. So
yes,
I think that was very pointed and definitely beneficial in terms of this discussion and conversation. And thank you for that. And I know I said the last question, but this is officially the last question. So with all the work that you do, and maybe if someone wanted to seek you out, how can someone stay connected or find you, or kind of reach out to you for any of the work that you're doing, be it in with within the church or within your counseling practice as well?
of course, absolutely. So for anyone looking to connect with me, or kind of engage in therapy, one of the best places to reach me is on my website at www.bethesdathera.com. You can also find me on Instagram at BethesdaThera, and also I have a personal Instagram, but that's not really what's important. You need the Bethesda Instagram. So of course, the website is the best way. You can get on there, get connected, book a consultation. They're free. We can have a conversation, see if this is the best fit for you, and we can take things from there. Intimate partner violence doesn't have to continue in your home and in your relationship. We can figure out a way to kind of make that dissipate and restore your relationship to a healthy position, if that is the right relationship for you. And of course, connecting with the Africa Center and any other community collateral organizations to kind of make sure that, you kind of have your needs met in that way. And they can also connect you to organizations within the community, or any practices and therapists that will be able to help in that way.
100%. And I'll make sure to maybe put your link for the website or Instagram in the bios also. It's easier for people to find. But that is everything. Thank you so much, Zainab, for your time, knowledge, expertise, the conversation today. And thank you all for listening to Better Than the Cure, Preventing Intimate Partner Violence. And we hope that we will catch up with you next time. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you, Yawa.